Hi. So today I want to talk about subconsciously held identity files and self-sabotage. So if you have been paying attention to what I'm doing with Patreon, you would know that this week that's the topic, self-sabotage. And what I'd like to do instead is call it this. So these like that, self-sabotage, abbreviated as such, because there are some feels around that, right? It's like kind of embarrassing. I think a lot of the work that I do is maybe like this is wishful thinking, or anecdotal, but it seems like everybody that I interact with at a client level and who I am fortunate enough to meet in IG DMs, like they're really fucking smart. And I think what's really frustrating about the self-sabotage pattern when you're really fucking smart is like if I'm so fucking smart, then how come I can't get myself to do this? Or why does this keep happening? And it's extra, like, it's another layer of emotion because you've got like the thing that's not working, and then you've got your feelings about the thing that's not working, and then depending on your level of awareness, you might even have feelings about your feelings, like I should let this go, I should not be judging myself, and you're like judging that you're judging yourself. So the way that I view self-sabotage is it's basically a way that we prevent ourselves from growing forward. So it's like, if I stay busy with this shit that I know, I won't have to stretch into an unknown area where I may find that I'm not so great after all, or life's not so great after all, or I really can't hang, or it's not safe, my heart is hurt. So it's almost like this chase the tail sequence that keeps you in a place of safety. Isn't that ironic? It's like, look, we'll just stay here with the shit that we know, and then we won't have to deal with any new shit. And like, this shit's like meh, but the new shit, like, what if we can't hang? Which brings me to the point of being on the same team as yourself. This is the biggest fucking thing you could ever do. When you start to examine whether or not critical dialogue is helpful to you, you might find that it's not. Somehow we have this like voice all the time that's like, oh, you're too fat, oh, that was stupid, why'd you do that, or oh, you don't have as much as them, or blah 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 blah. How does that help at all? And yet it persists. And then there might even be a guy behind that that's like, oh, now you have that, like you can't even get your dialogue to be in line. Which brings me to this sort of like shrug solution, where you just sort of say like, shrug, maybe this is perfect. And perfect in a way that the tension that it's creating for you, the perspective that it's inviting, the pain that you can transmute is like, maybe that's perfect. Maybe that is like right on time. I think the example of someone giving birth is really helpful. It's like, if you walked into a room in the middle of somebody giving birth, you'd be like, whatever you're doing, stop. Like, this isn't right. Like, if you didn't know anything, you'd be like, stop. Like, ah. And yet, then there's life. And so I think it's really helpful to remember, whenever we are very critical of whatever's happening, that we could be wrong. Like, maybe this is right. So as it pertains to self-sabotage, I think then the first rule is kindness to self. If you're fucking up something that you really care about or something that you want to do, like, that's okay. Maybe it's perfect. And so the first step would be just like allowing it to be. Like, be nice to yourself about it. Like, start to interact with you like you would someone outside of you. So another thing that I find with people that end up in my world is they're very attuned to the emotional and mental needs of other people. And so they can very easily, when confronted with someone who is in pain or difficulty, know exactly what to say, know exactly what to do, and really like meet them and empathetically like go there with them and and comfort them and say like, hey, you're okay, like don't worry, like you've got this. And they can kind of be like that beacon of light and hope. So you've got this badass beacon that you're pointing at other people, and if you can just point it at yourself, like, whoa, can you imagine? So I think that's really important. So today we're talking about self-sabotage and what you can do to like break the pattern. And the first step is kindness to yourself. So like take your beacon of like goodwill, forgiveness, love, all that, and like point it back at you. And when you notice that you are being critical of yourself for not being able to break the pattern, or critical of anything that you're doing, have done, or may do, just like hug up on it instead and say like, maybe this is perfect. Maybe this is exactly the lesson that I need to be able to do what I'm going to do next. So step 2 then would be to visualize what success would look like. And this can be really difficult, especially if it's not something that you've experienced before. So when I'm talking about visualization, I'm using it more as a cue to the feeling. So what would it feel like if that was no longer a problem? And this is huge for people who have been in patterns of pain patterns of pain and lack for a while. It's like, wait, what? There's another way? So if you can, start to imagine what it would be like if that was no longer a problem that you were solving. If you had everything that you needed, if you were capable of doing what you wanted, if it really was perfect that you weren't doing that thing, then how would you feel? What would you focus on? What would you invest your time and energy in? So it's like the mental bandwidth that's now on that problem. Like if it wasn't on that problem, or busy holding that problem back from your awareness, where would it go? And that is a really huge like trap door for people who are, I call them like high points of consciousness. Hey Cash. But basically it just means like you tap into like a fuck ton of energy. And how do you know if that's you? Well, you're either expressing brilliantly in the world, or you're experiencing like high anxiety or high depression. And it's that, to me, anxiety and depression is just that energy hasn't found an outlet. And usually the outlet is blocked through ideas of the mind, where it's saying like, you can't be that. It's not great for you to be that great. It's not safe for you to be that. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so the energy kind of gets blocked. The impulse is interrupted, and it kind of stalls. That's just kind of what I've seen. It's in a hypothesis, if you will. So if you're just joining, what I'm talking about today is self-sabotage. The first step I introduced was kindness to yourself. So no matter what the fuck you are doing or you aren't doing, be nice to yourself about it. Be so understanding. Be the nicest, like whoever you would be the sweetest person ever to, imagine how you would respond to them. Maybe it's like somebody's kid you really like, or maybe it's your grandma. Like take that beam of love and flip it this way. And anytime you notice that you are not supporting yourself in that way, don't judge that. That's okay. It's just momentum. It's just a habit. That's okay. Allow for the dialogue to change. Allow for yourself to become supportive. Soothe. How do you soothe? You say, that's okay. It's okay, Shaylee. It's okay that happened. It's okay. I know you're doing your best. I know you want to do better. And it's okay. You will. The second step is visualization, but not from an imagery standpoint so much as like a feeling standpoint. What would it feel like if that wasn't a problem for you anymore? So if we look at something like nutrition or eating, there's so much fucking noise around what you should eat. We're like animals. We pretty much would figure it out if left to our own devices, but there is so much noise about what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how you should do it, blah, blah, blah. And then there's also like the noise in the food that disrupts our natural wisdom. It's engineered to do so. But that also occurs. Oh man, I read the note and I forgot where I was going. Visualization, the feeling. Oh, okay, so like if nutrition has always been an issue for you, or if you've been unhappy about your body for some time, you might not even know what it would feel like if that wasn't a focal point. Like if you weren't self-conscious about what you look like, if you weren't uptight around food, if you weren't always like thinking about why it's okay that you didn't work out and you will later and what you're going to do some other time. Like if you weren't doing that, what would you be doing? And that can be the hardest leap, is to go beyond that like track we've been running. So that could be with money, that could be with relationships. I know a lot of people who are looking for love, and they're so busy looking for that, and they're so familiar with the sensation of it not being present that they can't even imagine what it would be like if they did have it. And that is the opportunity vibrationally, and like as far as I can tell, the way that the universe is structured, you got to feel it, like tune into the station, and then it becomes present. But not only that, let's just say like everything is feeling it, and it is when you look at it. It's like, why do I want that? Well, I think it'll make me feel some type of way. And if you can allow yourself to feel some type of way without the thing, it kind of frees you from the chase. So if you're just joining, good day, Sean. If you're just joining, today I'm talking about self-sabotage, and breaking it down into a few steps. And the first step I mentioned was just being super, super sweet to yourself, and to apply whatever love and understanding you would to someone else to you. The second step is visualization, and that's just to generate the feeling of what it would be like if you were beyond that issue. Matthew asks, why are we always chasing the next good thing? I think it's because it's that concept of separation where we think that there is something outside of ourselves, and the opportunity is really coming to accept that like we are everything, like I am. And it can be kind of like a collapse of concepts that are very scary, because it's almost like, oh, I've been playing this Monopoly game so long, I don't want to lose, like I got to keep playing a game. But like if you can like zoom out a little and be like, oh fuck, like that thing I've been wanting the whole time, like that's in me, like that's that validation, that's something I need to give myself. That love, that's something I need to give myself. Then it kind of frees you from the chase. So what if we are just everything? And as far as I can tell, like, we are. And by that I just mean like at a particle level. It's like all sort of like the same quantum field. And the point then of doing anything is really just to experience the doing of it, and to use it as a vehicle of expression of love, to get bigger, to appreciate even more of this experience. So to me, like focus and effort and all of that is actually just a practice of appreciation, becoming more and more familiar with what's there in a way that you kind of love it. If you haven't read the book, The Little Prince, it's a story by Saint something, I can't remember. But he talks about there's this fox that's like, oh, so why is your flower important? And he's like, my flower is important because I will. And they basically conclude that the flower is important because he tended to it. It's like, out of all these fields of flowers, why is that your flower? And in all these fields of foxes, why am I your fox? And it's just your fox because you tended to it. And I think that's kind of like true of most. It's like we come to care for things because we've cared for them. I think that went in a different direction, but all right. So if you're just joining, I'm talking about self-sabotage, and the first step I said was be so nice to yourself. 2, visualization. Get in the feeling. If you didn't have that problem anymore, what would your life feel like? The next step, let's see, what kind is... So we look at, I've been talking about identity files, and this is helpful from an understanding standpoint. I really want to emphasize that understanding, as far as I can tell, is just sort of like for the fuck of it. every element of understanding or every point of understanding is just to help us relax and accept whatever's happening and just kind of be with what's present. And so understanding is a vehicle to get where you already are. And you can go through the process of understanding to help you relax, but you don't have to. So I just want to emphasize that at any point, like that moment, that door of acceptance is right there. It's always there. You can always take it. And if you find that you're having difficulty with it or your mind is super active, these are other things that you can do. So with the identity files, what's helpful in reviewing this as a possibility for you is acceptance of self. So let's say that in reflection, you notice that the environment that you were raised in was rife with lack. Maybe there was a culture that it wasn't safe to say what you really thought or felt because grandma was going to get mad, or, oh, no, we can't do that. So like, you were saturated with this idea that it's not, hey Alex, hey Leslie, you were saturated with this idea that it wasn't okay to, speak what's true to you. And so that might be your pattern of self-sabotage currently, where you've got this feeling, this truth, and you know there's like an environment that you're in that needs to, hear that it's like to fit you. It's like they're not getting full feedback. Guys, I'm trying to work. No, thank you. They're not getting feedback. So it's so important. Nobody knows what you need or what you want or how you feel unless you tell them. And some people are better at guessing than others, but nobody's perfect. Nobody's great. And if you have been saturated or trained in an environment where it isn't safe for you to share how you feel, then you're probably not going to do it. And so the world around you isn't going to fit because they're not getting real-time feedback about what fits or feels good to you. So when we're talking about self-sabotage, which we are today, then the step there is to accept that it's not you. It's like not your, it's like, it's a shirt that you're wearing, but it's not who you are. And so you can take it off. It's not a you problem you have to solve. It's nothing you have to feel guilt or shame about. It's just like if you learned how to hold your pencil like this versus if you learn to hold your pencil like this. You just have to retrain. That's it. That's all. And the way to do that is to do it wherever it feels safest. Where are you most comfortable to practice? And you don't have to go from zero, I'm holding all my feelings and secrets and thoughts in here, to like all out, like let me sing about it on the street corner. It can just be like, oh, hey, I said this earlier, and actually what I meant, or what would have been closer to what I meant, is this. And then you put blank space. Blank space is my favorite conversation tool ever. If you're trying to facilitate understanding, you might be in a place of fear, and in that fear, you're like, and so it might not really be about, like, it might not be like, when you're approaching the conversation, you might be fearful to like create space. Like, what might I hear? What might I see? Can I cope? However, if you allow for that, you'll come to know things you didn't know you needed to know. It's like there's so much when we approach conversation of projection, where it's like, I have these types of feelings and thoughts, and so I expect this person to have these types of feelings and thoughts. So in my head, I'm building out a conversation with this person based on how I think, but they might function completely differently. So if you can allow them the space to share with you what's real for them, then it's like, then you can really like come together in a way that's like safe, and information is exchanged. So if you're joining today, I've been talking about self-sabotage and the steps to kind of like climb out of it. And the first is so much kindness to yourself. Like, be so nice. If this is a problem that you've been having for a ton of years, you might need to be really nice to yourself about it for 6 months. That's okay. That's okay. What's the rush? Like, again, when we examine if being harsh on ourselves is helpful and you find that it's not, and if you find that it is, like, tell me. And maybe for some people it is. I don't know. But if you find that being harsh on yourself is not shifting the reality, then maybe you try something else. And maybe what you try is just being so fucking nice to yourself, as nice as you would be to someone else. The next step I suggested was visualization, and that's from a feeling standpoint. Like, if that was not a problem for you anymore, if you could speak your truth, if you were confident, if you were fit, if you were financially abundant, if blah, 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 how would you be? How would you act? What would you feel like? What would you focus on? If your head wasn't there, where would it be? And that is honestly like the biggest leap for most, especially if it's been something that's been a problem for a while, or if it was a function of your early conditioning, because it might be hard for you to fathom what that would even be like. And so for that, you might actually start with just a question. What would it feel like if I didn't? What would it feel like if I was in a place of wholeness? What would I feel like if I was safe? And maybe you write that question somewhere, and so then your universe starts to orient itself to show you examples of that. Maybe you walk by a couple on the street and you see how they interact and you're like, oh my God, that's that. Yeah, that's that. Or maybe you read something and you're like, oh wow, yes, I get it. So just kind of like throw open the door and see what comes in. The next thing I talked about was identity files. And that's, again, like, this is from an understanding standpoint. Thanks for coming, Alex. Bye. I miss you. From a understanding standpoint, which is really just like, again, like, understanding, as far as I can tell, is just it's just something stuck in time. Understanding is for time, and at any point you can enter into acceptance by just saying, like, well, here we are. But it can be helpful to support that acceptance, especially if you have a really strong mind, through different types of understanding, which to me are just like broadening your perspective, considering other possibilities. And so with the identity file consideration, what I'm suggesting is to look at your self-sabotage pattern as a function of your early, like 0 to 7 or 0 to 18 life, and see if it's possible that you were trained that way. And in that instance, can you be nicer to yourself and say, like, hey, look, this is not a me problem. This is just a tool that I'm holding that doesn't work. So maybe you've been holding empathy with the wrong end, and all you have to do is start practice picking up and holding it with this end. That's it. You just practice. It's okay. It's going to take time. It's a pattern to break. It's okay. It takes time. And with the understanding component, it can be helpful to explore, is the thing that you think is required actually required? So when we go back to the transparent communication example, we may have been trained that it is helpful, or it is appropriate and right to make somebody else's experience easy. And so you would do that by not sharing with them your problems or your feelings. When you kind of like zoom out and you ask, is that actually helpful to that person? You might be surprised that the things that you thought were required for functioning are actually putting enough strain on the system that it'll ultimately collapse anyhow. So like, if we look at a romantic relationship, if there isn't real-time feedback going back and forth, yes, both people are in like their little safe bubbles, but their safe bubbles are floating further and further apart because what's true to them is like not touching anymore. Let's see, Sean said, harsh seems to work better for me. I tend to be more about moving away from pain as opposed to moving towards reward or pleasure. And that could be very true for you. And I think that, you know, what I would challenge you to consider, however, is that if your model requires you to move away from pain, then your model requires pain. And maybe that I'm not sure if pain is inherent in the entirety of experience or if it's only inherent to a point. So Eckhart Tolle talks about suffering, and he says, like, is suffering necessary? And he's like, well, yes, until it's not. And I seem to, and maybe there are multiple layers, but right now I've been really strongly seeing there's like deficit life, like balance, and then like growth. And so perhaps that works down here, but maybe it doesn't work up here. I'm not sure. And I think that's really helpful too to consider with these identity files, is sometimes we get these ideas about who we are and who we need to be that inhibit us from stepping into who we really are or who we could be. And that could be something like for example, I come across as very like upbeat and cheery and bright, and generally I am. However, with that being part of my identity, it didn't allow for me to experience some deeper or darker emotions that kept me from growing forward, because I didn't allow for that to be part of my experience because it wasn't who I thought I was. And so there are different pieces of how we capture and conceptualize ourselves that can keep us frozen in a place for no reason other than we just think that's how we are, or we don't know that it's okay to be different than how we are. So if you're just joining, what I've been talking about today is self-sabotage and different steps that you can try and moving beyond it. So this is actually a part of the week 1 Inner Space Station series on my patreon.com/habitbook platform. So on Thursdays, I do lives about the topic, starting with this one. And if you're just joining, what I talked about today as far as steps, and I'll continue this on Friday. The first step was kindness. Be so nice to yourself. So nice, so nice. When you notice that you are being critical of what you're doing, like stop, drop, and reflect, like, is this helpful? And I think the only thing I can really hold on to as helpful is, for sure and always, is what thought feels the best. And if I can choose a thought or a frame or a space that feels the best, then somehow it allows what's happening to happen in a way that doesn't perpetuate it. So if that's attaching like a meaning to it, that's like, this must be for my betterment. Or if it's just soothing, it's okay. Like whatever layer of understanding you can kind of like ice on it to allow for it to move, I totally recommend. And to me, that's just like efficiency. Oh. Yeah. Today is Wednesday. I do this on Wednesdays. It's my first week. Actually, I have a really cute graphic that I put in a newsletter that's sending out tonight at 9:15 Eastern with the whole month schedule. But the first month, so what I'm talking about right now is Patreon, my Patreon schedule. So I'm handling that platform like exercise programming. So it's like you want to hit back and buys every Monday. So every Monday we're hitting self-sabotage in the following months. This first month we're hitting, it's like each station gets its own intro week, and then we'll rotate through them. At least I'll see how it unfolds. Okay, so going back to self-sabotage. 1, kindness. 2, visualization. To imagine what it would feel like if that wasn't an issue anymore. Can you bring yourself to a place of like, wow, I get it. This is what it's like to not have that problem. Then you're like mostly there. And that's not from denying it. That's just being able to step into what it would be like if that was your reality. Step 3, the identity files. Let's look for understanding. Where can you better understand how you develop this pattern of self-sabotage in a way that makes you nicer to yourself about it? Where you can say like, look, this shit ain't me. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing, like, I'm not broken. I'm not busted. I'm not terrible person. I'm not lazy. I'm not anything. I just learned a way of being that's not supportive of what I want to do, where I want to go. And I said this in the article I wrote the other day, but what's interesting about self-sabotage is that sometimes it doesn't look like that. Like, we wouldn't call it that necessarily. We would just notice that something's not working for us. So like, maybe going back to relationships, maybe they just, everybody dates crazy. Maybe all this stuff happens each time, and it's like, really? Each time? You know? So it's like there are things that happen that we blame the external reflection for that are really just a function of our internal expectations and beliefs. And so we can keep wrestling with the stuff outside, but until we change the internal script, we'll just keep experiencing the same thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can, and it's okay. It's just, if you would like to experience something else, it can be helpful to look at the expectations that you have of the world. And like, I'm not fucking around. Like, this shit works. Like, I mean, maybe not for everybody, maybe not for everything, but personally, and with the client work I've done over the last 6 years, like, when you change how you look at the world that you see changes. And it seems impossible for certain areas of our lives, especially the ones that have been most difficult. But if, like, I don't know, like, try for yourself. The last step I talked about was identity, and I think I just touched on that, but the idea is really just to the idea would just be to let yourself come to better understand how you might have how you might have come up with that pattern, that way of being, in a way that frees you. True that. You can't get wet using the word water. You gotta get in. Amen. So this is just a brief intro. So if this content is helpful for you, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Patreon and where this is going to go to after it like hangs out on IG for a little while. So the platform is fucking ridiculous. It's super easy to use. You can search based on tags. So all the content that I do will start to go there now. If you've been a part of any of the clubs I've run, or you have worked with me, you know that I'm like hot on this shit and like absolutely love to pour myself into it. And so I'm super excited to build out this inner space resource hub so that you can, just do you. There will be meditations, and there's a meditation posted yesterday with the alternative sentences that I read in a cute little downloadable format. There's a community feature that's building out around the experience with all my IG friends. So you might notice, like, when people come on IG, I'm like fucking pumped. There are very few people in my IG that I've met, not very few. Let's say like a lot of the people in my IG world I have not met in person, but have been doing this song and dance for like 3 years now, and I feel like I know them. And the group that I've been fortunate to connect with is like, they're so amazing. Like, how the hell, I don't know how I got so lucky, except that like I was too naive to give a fuck, and so I just said whatever I wanted and what I really felt, and people who really felt that way or thought that way like showed up, and now I have like, it's just amazing. And so it's so cool to connect these like people, because generally they're like in isolation somewhere. They have these thoughts, these feelings, this experience, this range, and the world around them isn't really validating it. So it's like you kind of feel like you're crazy when it's just like an environment thing. And so this culture, this club, this group, really, this community allows for you to be like, wait, maybe I do know what's up, and maybe I'm not crazy, which is just like, it's freeing. It's so great. I'd like to thank everybody for the feedback on my shirt. It means a lot. All right, so that's all I had for today. Any topics that are interesting to you or that you definitely want covered, please let me know. Going back to Patreon. So this week I'm talking about self-sabotage. Next week I'm talking about habits of action. So I kind of break experience into 3 parts, 3 points. Mind, body, and you, and there are different environments that you can manage for success, and it's like more like lead. And so the habits of action is about the body. And thank you for tuning in, Matthew. Matthew's coming from the UK, Ireland. Okay. Thank you, Cash. He's over there as well, Ish. And Sean, energy return to you that you put out. That's technology. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I talk about habits of action next week, and then week 3 is real relationships. Scotland. And what's cool too, everybody here has like their own thing. So like if you pay attention to the names and like follow each other, you probably will like each other. Because everybody's like super inspiring and amazing and an expert in their own space and field and way, and it's really cool to like just witness. Dallas. Okay. So week 3 is relationships. So this is like super exciting to me right now. This is like how to transcend traumatic experience and open to love, and like have conversations that are safe and progressive, and to really just allow yourself to enjoy the love that's in your life, rather than kind of like contort to fit dynamics that exist in fear. And the last one I'm calling exec producers, and I'm looking at the whiteboard. And the exec producers one is just in support of everyone's like uniqueness. So it's like when you're doing your thing while you're like singing your song, what can help keep you in motion? What tools do you need? What confidence? What blah 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 blah. So I'm super excited about that. I hope you guys join me. Like I said, tonight at 9:15 Eastern, there's a newsletter going out. If you're on my list, you'll get it. If you aren't, you won't. But you can send me a message and I will share it with you. If you are already on Patreon, where this goes next, thank you so much for joining me here. I'll start to do these lives on YouTube in an exclusive Patreon format. So basically the YouTube live will just be announced to my patrons, and maybe I'll do a little on the IG, but I really want to focus there and kind of like create a network effect. All right. Thank you so much for coming. Great to see you guys. Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about before they go? Just scrolling back. Leslie, thank you for coming. If you're here. Cool. Night Cash, thanks for coming. Oh, Randy, no, I was talking about the Patreon channel. So I'm gonna start pushing my content there. It's just like a better way to organize and experience it. There's this really cute email that goes out when I post that's like, hey, here's the thing. So it's like it's basically, like Instagram is largely algorithm based, so sometimes you won't even know when something's like is posted or gone. So this takes that out of the equation, and it also allows you to sort content based on whatever mood you're in. So I'm being very intentional in how I'm tagging things. So let's say like you need confidence and you just search that and it'll be this, or maybe it's like meditation or support for nutrition or whatever. So I will be on Instagram, but I want to start putting my stuff in a place that it's a better platform. Instagram's is like a turn and burn type of thing. Everybody's really here rather quickly, Phil, thank you for coming. What do you mean Patreon doesn't work for you? And thank you for that feedback. And I saw that your book's coming out. I'd love to see some more about that. It looks It looks interesting to me. All right. No other questions? Oh, it fails? You mean the link that I've provided or just like the application? Yep. I think I'm in Dallas indefinitely. Patreon is same name. It's patreon.com/habitbook. And it's... Have you been on a web browser or in the application? I'm not really sure what to do with that. It's worked beautifully for me. But let's talk offline. If you have difficulties with it, I'm happy to help you tech troubleshoot. Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming. It is great to see you all. And again, like, if you pay attention to each other's names and like just kind of like follow along, I really, must be divine. I really am blessed or fortunate to be able to connect with people at a very like deep level, and the like commonality is like there's like this like layer of life around us that kind of makes us unrecognizable, but there's like this thread that runs through us all that's like, holy fuck, you see what I see. And so this piece is like really beautiful and interesting to experience in all these different outfits. So I do like meet and greet each other. All right, thank you so much for coming. Love you guys. Bye.